Greetings, YouTube. There's a cat over there. Today I'm going to talk about the book The Noble Wild by the Skirmisher Publishing Group. This is an OGL 3.5 book designed around the idea of being able to play animals. Not shapeshifters, not anthropomorphic animals, actual real-life animals. Now, obviously, they're not just going to have the stats of the animals do from the monster manual. They do have intelligence. All the other stats are going to be a close reflection of the real animal. Now, from the get-go, the game presented me with a concept that I didn't like. It said that when designing a character in this game, you have to make a choice from the start. And that is, you have to decide if you're going to serve or challenge humanity. And as far as the animals are concerned, humanity means anything that's got two legs. And by this, they mean you have to either decide, are you going to be a domesticated, subservient part of the human pack, the humanoid pack, or are you going to challenge them and remain wild? I'm really not comfortable with that binary way of looking at things. It seems to completely preclude the concept of cooperation. I mean, if you're an intelligent animal, there will be times in your life where cooperating with the humanoids is good, and there will be times when opposing the humanoids is smart. And that's going to vary from time to time and location to location. So I'm not really comfortable with coming out of the gate and being told, okay, you got to stand on one side or the other of this line. I didn't like that, and if I were going to run this product, I wouldn't use it. I mean, there are people who complain that alignments are restricting. This is a whole lot worse, in my opinion. But after that, it opens up and shows you all the different animals that you can play. And they cover domesticated animals. They cover woodlands, temperate animals, tropical animals. So if you can think of an animal, it's in here, or at least it's got a close enough approximation that you could very easily file off the numbers and make the animal type that you want to play, even if it is not present. Now, to get the animals balanced, they have to kind of go outside 3.5 restrictions when it comes to stats, for example. Not every single animal has a +1 to 1 stat and a -2 to another. It varies from animal to animal because you're trying to achieve a balance of eventually having the animal be as close to the real thing as possible. Because of this, a number of these animals have racial classes, and the racial classes allow you to build your character towards the full-fledged animal. For example, like a brown bear is a very powerful animal. You can't play a brown bear from first level at the same level it would be as a full adult. It would be way outbalancing. So they have racial classes built in. Some of them are like 7, I think it's 7 levels for a brown bear. Elephants, I think, are 11. But some of them only have 1 racial level. For example, baboons. That particular racial level lets you go from being a small baboon to a medium-sized baboon, which is a nice choice. You may want to play a small baboon, or you want to play one that's medium. And if you want to play that, you take this one class level. If you don't want to take it, you don't take it. It also had a number of other things built into it. I mean, like any other class level does. Another thing that some of these animals have is what they call a size threshold. And this says that if you hit a certain hit dice, say 3 hit dice, you will go up 1 size category. And in some cases, like a brown bear, at a later date, I think it was 7th level, you will then jump to the next size category, large. And you get all the accompanying improvements and penalties. You get a bonus to strength and con, negative to dexterity, you know, the routine. So this really helps balance out each of the different races. And again, some have a 1 level racial class, some have 3, 5, 7, 11. It depends on which one you're playing. Some of them have none at all. So because some of them are fairly close to being balanced right from the get-go. This book also has a nice appendix in here listing all the stats for real animals that this book covers that aren't necessarily covered by the OGL or the monster manual or something like that. Because a lot of the time they would just fudge them, just like, okay, use this stat, or like a mouse was never been statted because it was only ever used as a familiar. Well, there's mouse race in here, so so you need stats for a mouse race in case you ever want to use mice outside of a player character. Now, some of the things I thought was interesting is that some of the races have static strengths. It says a mouse has a strength of 1. That's it. You want to bring it up higher than 1, you can use magic items, or you can use your bonus to your stat as you go up in levels. But that's it. That's what your character is going to have. And that's a good baseline. For example, ravens and rats have a 2. Again, that seems reasonable. But for some strange reason, the parrots were given a -6. So a parrot out of the gate is going to have a 4. A parrot is has no more strength than a raven does. I have no idea why they did that. I also don't understand why the ravens and the parrots have a single talon attack. That makes perfect sense for an owl, a single talon attack. It's how an owl hunts. Ravens and parrots don't hunt with their feet. Ravens hunt with their beaks, and parrots don't hunt at all. So I was a little confused. There were certain things in here that just didn't make a lot of sense to me, and that's one of them. Another thing I didn't quite grasp is why they seem to think that tortoises and turtles are the same thing. Tortoises and turtles are not the same thing. Turtles live in water, aquatic environments. Tortoises are dry land animals. They are not the same, and they should not be treated the same. That bothered me a little. After the chapter of all the different animal types, and there's lots of them, you have a lot of choices in here, folks, so you're not going to have to worry about having a small selection. They get into how different standard core classes in 3.5 could be modified to be used by these. For example, none of the classes get a craft. They get survival in its place because animals really don't craft things for the most part. And this is the core classes available in the OGL only. Then they get into a new base class called the Greater Familiar. And this allows you to play a familiar of another character, traditionally a humanoid. And what's nice about this is you get slots of counterspell. So you get counterspells 1st level through 9th level, just like spells, that would allow you to defend your master from spells coming in. So essentially you become a magical countermeasure. This is an awesome idea. I think this should be adapted to all real everyday familiars that are not intelligent animals on their own right. Because for the most part, people ignore familiars. They get the short change, you know? So I think that adapting this counterspell idea would really make the familiar a useful tool for a spellcaster. Really like this idea. Then they have some prestige classes. The Alpha, the head of your particular social group, makes perfect sense. The Man Ape, if you want to play an ape that has desires of being more human-like. The Man-Eater, there are horrors in the night, and it is you. You hunt humanoids, you devour them, and you take energy and power and magical abilities from their organs. The Mighty Hunter, tin does what it says in the tin. The Monastery Mascot, here you go. These are the animals that inspired all the different kung fu styles of martial arts. These are the animals that did it. Awesome idea. The Noble Disciple, the opposite of the idea. An animal that picks up martial arts ideas and learns to use martial arts from hanging out in a monastery. The Totem, again, you are the focus of a tribal humanoid culture. And the War Mount, a prestige class for being the best mount that anyone could ever conceivably want. Then we get into something called deeds. Now, most animals are never going to use magic items ever. Animals don't make items. They're not going to carry items. There are feats in here which allow you to take magical creation abilities that are built into your body, like paint, feathers, things to emulate potions, scrolls, wondrous items, things like that. But then the deeds allow you to build magical abilities into your character. Each has 5 levels, and they are available at 1st, 2nd, 4th, 7th, and 11th level. Now you have to use experience points to pay for them. I don't like that idea. I've never liked the idea of using experience points to pay for magic items. I don't like the idea of using experience points to pay for deeds. So I would just say you get one at every odd level. 1st, 3rd, 5th, 7th. So at the end, you could have a number of different complete chains. You could have 4 complete chains by the time you're 20th level, or a mishmash of partial chains if you so wanted. Now, some of them are pretty straightforward, like a chain that gives you a magical bonus to one of your natural attacks. +1 That's first level, first deed, +2 at the next deed. And you have to meet other prerequisites. For example, you may have to slay a particular tough animal to acquire this. Each different deed has its own unique role-playing inspired prerequisite, which I really like. It's almost like questing items in an MMO, but I think they're more interesting. And there was one in there that makes a badger or a wolverine an incredibly good burrower. I mean, you can burrow, you can run when you burrow. You can burrow very fast, and you take all 5 levels, you can burrow through steel. This is an awesome idea. Now, some of these, I think they're a little underpowered, as in, like, the first level one is useful at first level. It gives, like, an ability to cast a particular spell. But by the time you're 11th level, you can only cast that spell once per day. I think these things should be once per day per deed. So at the top level, and you've gotten all 5 deeds, you could use that first deed you got 5 times a day. That, to me, makes it much more balanced with the other abilities that you would even find in a 3.5 game, let alone a Pathfinder, which is a little more powerful. Then we have magic items and spells, which is talking about how to get different types of, how to build the magic items into the system, like I mentioned in the feats. Now, they have this weird thing in here called magical transparency. Apparently, if you're animal magic, your animal magic cannot be seen by humanoids, and humanoid magic cannot be seen by animals. And this makes 0 sense to me. I can understand if you were having intelligent animals in our world, so it would make sense that humans couldn't see the animals practicing magic. But player characters, half of them are spellcasters. You can't swing a cat and not hit a spellcaster in a D&D game. So having magic using animals is no big deal in my book. Another thing they have in here is blood components, because animals don't carry spell books and don't use material components. It allows you to use the animal's blood itself to cast your magic. Nice idea, but it does 1 point of damage per spell level. So you cast a 2nd level spell, that's 2 hit points of damage. You cast a 5th level spell, it's 5 points of damage. That's insane. You were punishing someone for using their core class ability. It's like telling a fighter, every time you land a blow successfully, you take 1 hit point in stun damage. Because, it reflects how tired you are. No, don't punish people for using their core class ability. Just let all the animals have askew material components, folks. They've got no hands. They're already being penalized enough. Then they have spells called boons. Now, I really like the boons. The boon spells allow the animals to have abilities that they don't normally have. Hands, for example. Or a bear could have a tiger's back claw attack. And you need to cast the spell twice to get both claws. And if you double the spell level of the spell, it becomes twice as long. And if you add experience points into it, paid by either the caster or the receiver, it becomes permanent. And you could, for example, take a bear. You could take a bear, build in claws in the back, antlers on the head, a tail. You could do some really cool things. This is like halfway between the traditional 3.5 game and Magic of Incarnate, which I think would fit this well as well. Fit the system as well. But the boons are awesome. I think they would be really useful for anyone that wants to do a Vow of Poverty chain, because the Vow of Poverty chain does not work well in 3.5. However, if you had boons added in, and people could modify their bodies above and beyond not having magic items, I think the whole Vow of Poverty would work perfectly. I think the boon idea is golden. It needs to be adopted to other things. Then we have some new spells, of course, because you only need new spells in any supplement like this, especially if you're going to be having so many animals doing things that are so far outside the norm of humanoids. And you get the magical treasures, fetishes, gifts, greater fetishes, jujus, lesser spell thralls, magic might, spell thralls, and wondrous traits. Again, all emulating the spells, the magic items that animals can't carry, so they're building them into their body. Then there's a whole bunch of things in here about different kind of campaign concepts. There's something in here, the chapter I mentioned about animal stats, and then a nice chapter about 10 or actually about 3 or 4 pages long, which how to adapt this to D20 Modern. Very useful. Now, a couple of things that really stood out to me. One was that you can have familiars, which are humanoids. So you could play a mouse with an orc familiar. That's awesome. Druids can have humanoid animal companions. Paladins, instead of getting a mount, get a humanoid escort they can summon to help them. And while they do mention psionic classes in the dolphins and porpoises, and again it's mentioned in the D20 modern chapter, I think that the psionic classes are tailor-made for these animals. The Psion class, power points, you don't need spell components. Psychic Warrior Bear is awesome. Soul Knife Tiger, that would be great. I mean, there's some really great ideas for that I think that could be taken from the Psionics rules and brought into this, particularly if you're using Pathfinder and you're using the Psionics Unleashed rules. Now, if you were going to bring this into Pathfinder, rather, I would have to make a few changes. A number of these races have an ECL because they're very powerful. I would bump all of the ECLs in this setting down by 1 for Pathfinder. So a number of the ones that have a +1 ECL would then be +0, and other ones, a couple of them have +2s, they would become +1s. You also might want to tinker with the stats a little because Pathfinder characters have a slightly better overall bonus of +2 as opposed to 3.5 characters. However, if you're looking for a supplement that lets you play animal characters, this is an awesome piece of work. It's a little uneven. It has spots that I don't agree with. I'm not 100% sold on it. I think a GM's going to have to do a little work here and there to get it to work in their campaign. But it's worth the effort. It's worth your time. And if you have any interest in this idea of just making cool familiars, cool war mounts, things like that, you want to read this book.